Deputy Dara Calleary.
Recorded on the 26th of February, the Irish people sent an overwhelming message that fairness in public policy and associated and necessary investment in public services was their #1 priority. In doing so, they turned their back on the US style of politics of those proposing excessive cuts in personal tax burdens, cuts that would come at the expense of investment in public services, including health, education and social housing. They turned their back on the policies of minimising state investment in services and allowing the so-called free market to dictate the pace. They turned their back on policies that denied medical cards to those in most need, policies that ignored hospital waiting lists, that cut supports for older people, and policies that undermined rural and community services across the island. They turned their back, ultimately, on the spin of an economic recovery that many parts of the island and many people were not experiencing. Minister Donoghue spoke earlier of a fundamental shift in the economic environment. Minister, there has been an even more fundamental one in the politics of this country since the 26th of February. Whilst the message was clear, the mandates given were less so, and that has resulted in a period of considerable instability. Parties and independent members in this House faced choices during March and April. We sought the support, as Deputy McGrath has said, of the House on 3 occasions to ask Deputy Micheál Martin to lead a government that would act on the messages that were sent and begin to reset the course that this country was taken on over the past 5 years. We did not receive that support. The choice then facing us was either to walk away from the responsibility given to us on the 26th of February, in turn leading to a second election and possibly a third, or to work with the result presented to us on the 26th of February to facilitate the formation of a government and to shape a fairer journey for this country. We took the second option. We faced up to the responsibility presented to us by the people, and we facilitated the formation of this government. And Minister, while you say there are people surprised that it has lasted this long, I look behind you and look around you, because many of your own colleagues were saying that long before you said it. Sé aim don socrú muinethe agus soláthar na investiu a dhéanamh í serviceí breise, cuidiú le pobl agus éifeacht practical a thuirt go dtí na galantais a lagar ma in bhar ógra. Sé rólatá ag Fianna Fáil na socrú muinethe agus soláthar ná dul chin chun súnasach a dhéanamh sna príomhraimsí seo sa bhóiséad 2017. The decision of the electorate, our decision to interpret the electorate's view in the way we have, and the stability that has caused became even more crucial when the people of the United Kingdom voted to exit the European Union. Deputy McGrath has dealt in detail with the potential consequences of that decision. Political instability which would have followed a second election here would gravely add to the negative consequences of that decision. However, in facilitating the formation of this government, Fianna Fáil ensured that there would be a minimum of a 2-to-1 split of the extra money available in this budget in 2017 between investment in public spending and tax reductions. In 2015, that split was 50-50. That means that there is far more money available for initiatives in health, in education, in housing, in childcare, social protection, in capital spending, and achieving that split and its associated expenditure is the foundation on which this all can respond to the challenge laid by the electorate on the 26th of February. The Government has made the choices as to much of the destination of that expenditure. In our confidence and supply agreement, we identified a series of policy principles that we wanted dealt with during the course of the lifetime of this agreement. This budget has shown progress on some of those, and we will use the agreement to seek further progress over the next 2 budgets. Concur, the notion of a confidence and supply agreement may seem a long way from daily lives. It may seem to be one of those articles of spin so often used in this House. However, arising from today's budget, if you are one of the nearly 79,000 people on a surgical waiting list, the priority Fianna Fáil has given to the National Treatment Purchase Fund, to home help, to home care packages will have a positive impact on that list. If you have mental health challenges, the priority Fianna Fáil has given to ring-fencing funding for the ongoing implementation of Vision for Change in 2017, a figure we understand to be €35 million, without the drama that is being associated with previous budgets, would assist you. If you are on a housing waiting list, the priority we've given to a proper allocation to build a house, but more importantly, the scrutiny that we will give to ensure that they are built, will assist you. We prioritise childcare in the Confidence and Supply Agreement, and accordingly we welcome the 35% increase in early years funding, which will assist with childcare costs. For children with special and additional needs, we prioritise a range of services. The appointment of physios, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists and resource teachers to be ring-fenced in order to address the waiting lists for assessment and subsequent treatments and the delays in school services. If you're a student at secondary school, we prioritise the reintroduction of ex-quota guidance counselling and a commitment to its full restoration over the coming 3 years. If you're a student at third level, we prioritise additional investment in third level education to begin to stem the challenges facing our third level sector. For postgraduate students, we prioritise the restoration of postgraduate grants, ensuring that postgraduate education is not the preserve of the wealthy. We prioritise resources for community initiatives such as CLOR and RAPID in rural and in urban communities around the country to build up community infrastructures. And in many other areas, we have prioritised delivery and the development of services, areas which my party colleagues will focus on during this debate, but areas that would not have seen any progress without Fianna Fáil insisting on that split in expenditure before facilitating the formation of this government. We haven't written this budget. There are areas we disagree strongly, but we have a responsibility to this country to provide political stability at a time of great challenge. We have married that mandate of responsibility with the mandate of fairness given to us last February. And whilst we have made progress today on the agenda of fairness, there is still a long way to go. There have been many previous announcements on budget days and on other days that have made no impact on the ground. And it is the priority of everybody in this House, led by the Committee on Budget Oversight, to ensure that the grand announcements made today and the big money mentioned actually hits the ground. For instance, in June of this year, an extra €500 million was allocated to the Department of Health. We were informed that it would assist in dealing with overcrowding in hospitals. It would assist in getting extra home help hours, amongst other health priorities. However, across this country today, there are no new home help hours available. There are no new home care packages available, and that is in spite of an extra €500 million allocation. We were told that this would solve it, but yet there are many people today who are in a hospital bed who cannot get a home help hour, people on palliative care needs who cannot get a home help hour, who are wondering where that €500 million went for them. Hospital waiting lists continue to rise in spite of that €500 million injection. The figures for September show that 78,696 people are in the queue for surgery, with nearly 9,000 of those waiting for longer than the maximum target of 15 months. Another 438,000 people are on outpatient waiting lists to see a specialist, a jump of 3,000 compared to August. And some 47,000 have waited to see a specialist for more than 15 months. The failure to make inroads into waiting lists over the summer, usually quieter months when more beds are free, and after a €500 million funding boost, is particularly disturbing. There has to be early and measurable action on waiting lists, and we feel that the NTB, a National Treatment Purchase Fund, by replicating the successes it had up until it was removed from this area in 2011, can begin to do that. We especially welcome the announcement that those in receipt of domiciliary care will now receive medical cards. And as I said, we await detail of the appointment of physiotherapists, speech and language therapists and OTs to particularly impact on children with disabilities and in special needs. Why is it that services to children with disabilities and additional needs seem to conspire against their families to make an already difficult life journey even more so? Why is it that parents have to fight different departments to get essential supports? Why is it that the silo way of doing government, and I don't mean this in a political sense, I mean it in an operational sense, conspires against families who already have a difficult journey? If this budget does anything, and this provision for children does anything, Minister, we need to break down the silos and make those difficult journeys a little less difficulty. And I will welcome the 900 extra resource teachers. They need to go into the areas where the need is most and where the waiting lists are longer. If we cannot get an assessment for a child, the journey of their life will be even more difficult, and surely we collectively will unite to ensure that this happens on the ground. The ring-fencing of money for Vision for Change is welcome. As I said, we believe that figure to be €35 million. But what is especially welcome is that the last-minute smash-and-grab strategy approach to mental health budget of previous years has been avoided. And again, we will need to see impact on the ground and how this affects those who need the services. And whilst we welcome the reduction in prescription charges for those over 70, there is a case to be made for those who are disabled or to get a similar reduction. My final thoughts on health are to remember that in 2017 there can be no revised estimate. There can be no extra €500 million found. If the trend of previous years in 2017 continues, there is no plan B. I'm willing to give Minister Harris a chance on this one, but the record of his two immediate predecessors in matching their budget day rhetoric to patient outcomes was simply appalling. The split between expenditure and taxation has allowed for a small but expansionary social protection policy package. My party has been criticised for promoting an increase in the old age pension. This, in spite of the fact that it is a commitment in the programme for government and was contained in almost all party manifestos ahead of the election. The notion, as expressed by one of our leading broadcasters last Saturday, that pensioners are loaded is absolutely without foundation. Older people were particularly targeted by Fine Gael and Labour in the last government. There was a raft of sneaky cuts and measures which directly affected the incomes of older people. Hikes in prescription fees, despite a promise to abolish them, changes to the eligibility criteria for medical cards, removal of the telephone allowance, reduction in other household benefits and the abolition of the bereavement grant all combined and resulted in an increase in the rate of deprivation for those aged 65 and over to go from 9.5% to 14.3% in 2014. We make no apology, Concurrer, for trying to reverse this trend. We weren't solely focused on pensioners, despite the narratives of some in this House. The increase in working age payments is welcome, especially as it is the first since 2009. And in conjunction with other measures across this budget, it will reduce the burdens for many. We expect these increases to begin at the very earliest date of the 3rd of March. I particularly welcome the increase in the income disregard for lone parents. The €20 increase will go some way towards reversing the changes introduced in the last government, which were misguided and resulted in severe hardship for many lone parent families. And as I said, this is only a start. Childcare is one of the cornerstones of this budget. We fully support the increase in funding to support families in meeting their childcare costs and to support TUSLA in additional responsibilities. But let's be clear, the package for families will only kick in September. I want to highlight some potentially unforeseen problems with the model proposed. We fear that the scheme may be discriminatory on couples who opt for joint assessment of income. The proposal is that households will be able to automatically determine their eligibility by inputting their PPS number online. However, this means an individual earning under $47,000 in a couple who have not opted for joint assessment of income will be able to claim the subsidy even if their partner is also earning. By contrast, an individual under $47,000 in a couple who have opted for joint assessment of income and whose partner is also earning may not be eligible for the subsidy. So you could have a married couple earning $50,000 who do not get the subsidy, while a cohabiting couple earning $80,000 will get the subsidy. And that is something that needs to be examined. In fact, the scheme seems to allow no choice or flexibility and relies heavily on TUSLA-registered childcare operators. We know that creches are already struggling to meet demand for places, and this scheme could potentially double or triple the demand for childcare places in creches. And whilst I welcome the commitment to funding of a sustainability study into the childcare sector, it is essential that this information is available as soon as possible to ensure that there is no unmet demand arising from this proposal. We have achieved a beginning on some of our priorities in education: ex-quota guidance counselling, additional funding for third level for postgraduate students. However, overall the education provisions are underwhelming. While progress on reducing the PTR this year was difficult owing to the pressure of demographics, we have returned to the stop-start pattern of reductions in the PTR at primary level. We need to get serious about reducing the PTR, particularly for those schools under serious pressure, and it must recommence in next year's budget. The reintroduction of ex-quota guidance was a key demand of our confidence and supply agreement. Guidance is essential at secondary school level. It is no longer the old career guidance that many of us would have gone through. It is now a much broader service and effectively used can be an effective weapon in tackling many challenges facing our teenagers, particularly those in the mental health area. The announcement of an increased €31 million for third-level education was another key input for Fianna Fáil. The Cassells report offers a stark picture of the challenges facing our third-level sector. I welcome the fact that the Education Committee, under the chair of my colleague Fiona O'Loughlin, are to begin an in-depth analysis of this report. However, it is essential that this budget send a signal of intent. It is, however, our view that the National Training Fund offers further potential for increasing funding to our third-level sector. And given that it is in surplus, and given the seriousness of the challenge facing our third-level sector, we will continue to pursue this avenue in the coming weeks. The allocation of money towards reintroducing postgraduate grants is a further vindication of confidence supply. Our ability to educate world-beating postgraduates continues to be a major factor in our ability to attract inward investment. However, postgraduate degrees cannot be the preserve of the financially secure. Capital expenditure has long been the Cinderella of Budget Day. The additional money announced today above the pre-budget expenditure ceilings is a drop in the ocean compared to what is required to overhaul and future-proof our country's infrastructure. The current capital plan lacks ambition. It was an exercise in electioneering rather than a genuine effort to grasp the nettle of long-term planning. Its extension over 6 years was essentially used to manipulate the figures to bolster the appearance of a significant increased investment. Ireland has only reached 1.8% of GDP on capital expenditure. Much of our capital spend is simply soaked up by ongoing maintenance costs rather than developing or improving projects. We need to increase this to 5% over the coming years to get to grips with the infrastructural challenge we face. When you consider that organisations such as the OECD, TASC, IBEC, IFAC, ICTU and Social Justice Ireland, in a very rare coalition, have all called for additional capital expenditure, it shows you that that need is well outlined. Confidence and Supply Agreement outlines a commitment to a full review of the plan in mid-2017. This is a critical part of this agreement for us. It is vital that this review gives an opportunity to take crucial decisions on pivotal infrastructure projects designed to address areas such as housing, transport, broadband, flooding and the bigger threats emerging from climate change. These areas are vital to our competitiveness and our long-term prospects. After years of delay and deprived funding, they can no longer take a back seat. Fianna Fáil has called for the establishment of a National Infrastructure Commission to take a long-term view on our capital spending over the next century. This commission should be tasked with planning over a 25-year period and moving Ireland towards the target of 5% of GDP investment, alongside a target of decarbonising and reaching our targets. Post-Brexit, it is imperative that the EU moves to ramp up capital expenditure. EU rules around spending must be revised with a view to enabling Member States to target investment in crucial infrastructure projects. This will help ensure that the EU thrives in the aftermath of Brexit, and as the country most exposed to Brexit, we surely have a strong case to make. This will require further work with Eurostat to ensure innovative mechanisms like PPPs remain off balance sheet. We must adhere to the fiscal rules to prevent imprudent fiscal policies engulfing Europe, but they cannot be allowed to strangle long-term investment. The Government must take a proactive approach to engaging with our EU colleagues to set this case clearly and set it out strongly. The post-Brexit gloom that has descended upon Europe cannot be allowed to undermine our capital ambition. We need to radically reassess the management of our capital budgets. As a country, we are still poor at delivering large-scale projects on time and on budget. There are many examples of how poor delivery is leading to delayed infrastructure and to frustration. One of the most pressing is those communities that are facing the threat of flooding once again this winter. Frankly, Minister, the OPW has a poor record of delivery to these communities. And whilst the extra allocation to today is welcome, I remain convinced that the OPW has either the capacity or the wish to deliver a proper flood management programme around this country. Similarly, in housing, while there is a big figure announced today, will it actually make a difference? The litmus test of the government's housing strategy will be how new bricks and mortar housing units are delivered on the ground. It is fair to say that the central obstacles to new social housing provision under the predecessor strategy was not the absence of targets or of spin, rather than a failure to address the obstacles to increasing public supply of social housing. Some of these will be addressed with this funding complement, but many won't be. Local authority new builds in 2015 were the lowest output on record, with just 75 homes built nationwide by county councils. Now we expect councils to start building 1,750 a year. We welcome the ambition, but we've heard it before, and we haven't seen a roadmap to that being achieved. I welcome the announcement of the infrastructure fund, but again it highlights, as do many initiatives, that co-financing is required from local authorities. And whilst much of the attention within the Department of Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government is focused on the housing package, I think it is important, in the context of co-financing initiatives throughout the spending document, to send a distress signal about the perilous state of local government finances. There has been much focus on the situation at Sligo County Council, but let's be in no doubt that for most local authorities, finances are under considerable pressure, and accordingly their ability to deliver on the spending programmes outlined in this budget and other basic services is considerably constrained. Many local authorities have no money to do basic repairs for tenants in local authority houses, yet you set them the challenge in this strategy of bringing closed local authorities back into use. They cannot make emergency repairs to roads when a problem arises, and they are not in a position to deliver on so many elements of the mandate that they have been given. Rather than putting the funding burden on local authorities through co-financing, it's time we got serious about the role and mission of local government. It's time that we properly defined it to deliver in the 21st century, as opposed to the 19th, for which many of its current structures are designed. And then we need to design a financial model that can deliver on that newly defined role and mission, rather than constantly adding things to its role and making its funding model up as we go along. The Capital Programme will be the final chance to get real about broadband and mobile telecommunications. The potential of the ongoing revolution in data and telecommunications should no longer be constrained by geography. This capital programme can ensure that. Communities across this island, both urban and rural, have suffered greatly during the economic downturn, as a result of the downturn, but also as a result of a change in living patterns away from towns and cities, be they rurally or urban-based. This leads to a vicious circle. That population decline reduces the prospects of investment, in turn leading to further decline, to empty premises, a withdrawal of services and a further decline. I welcome the announcement of a new town and village strategy within this budget, but again it must mean something. It must actually deliver people and give people the opportunity to once again return to live in towns, to return and live in the empty spaces over many retail premises. Town centre living used to be a major factor of accommodation in this country. It is no longer, for many reasons. A proper strategy would allow that. The reintroduction of funding for the Clore scheme is a welcome step, but again must be targeted and focused at delivering on essential services such as water schemes, local broadband schemes, and the package for regional road projects and LIS road projects must reflect the lack of investment in this area in recent years. The introduction of funding for RAPID is another acknowledgement of the short-sightedness of Fine Gael and Labour in dismantling many low-cost community initiatives taken away when most communities needed them. Urban communities face the same threat as many rural ones, but in different ways. The common denominator is the willingness of people to stand up for the future of their neighbourhood. That will for action needs to be matched not just by words, but by funding. One of the biggest threats facing our country is the perfect storm being faced by Irish agriculture. Extreme price volatility, ongoing poor weather conditions and the impact of Brexit are all combining to wreak havoc on virtually all sectors of farming. The threat of Brexit to Irish agri-food is stark. IBEC have recently estimated that for every 1% fall in the value of sterling, there is a parallel 0.7% drop in Irish agri-food exports. The analysis showed that the euro climbing to 90 pence translates into a 700 million drop in Irish exports and a potential 7,500 job losses. I welcome the moves in taxation that Deputy McGrath has referred to, and we also pushed hard through our confidence in supply to restore cuts made to Farm Assist, to Rural Social Scheme and to expand the GLOS scheme. And while I welcome the 25 million sheep scheme, the ultimate litmus test of this will be to enable all types of sheep farmers, hill and lowland, to maximise the payment they can draw down. The ANC scheme is an important mechanism to help maintain the continued use of agricultural lands. And while we pushed for restoration of ANC budgets in 2018, we are disappointed to know there is no movement on restoring them, and will continue to pursue this. Brexit represents a serious threat not just to farming but to SMEs, to entrepreneurs and to our retail community. It presents opportunities to the island. However, there is only a €3 million allocation given to our enterprise agencies to pursue those opportunities. It will hardly even cover salaries. And we need to look at other areas to assist our small companies, such as expanding schemes and the Credit Guarantee Scheme and Microfinance Ireland, to assist them in dealing with the challenges presented by Brexit. I'll ask the delivery of the additional services in this budget will fall to our civil and public service. We have highlighted the need the path to pay restoration for our civil and public servants. I want to reiterate again my party's support for the Lansdowne Road Agreement, the provisions for which there is an additional allocation in 2017 of some €400 million. This will continue, albeit on a small basis, income restoration across the board. However, the work of the new Public Service Pay Commission must commence now, and we must set down a path to pay recovery. However, the difficulties and the lack of trust between the public service and government at the moment has as much to do with non-pay issues as with pay. It is essential that the government recognises its past mistakes, its bad attitude, and it works to build trust on non-pay issues. The ability from the spending split underpinning this budget will allow room to improve services and to increase employment in key areas. We now need the government to improve on the other issues that are undermining their relationships with those that work so hard for this state. This year's budgetary process was supposed to be very different in the context of our Dáil reform process. The reality is, it's however very much the same. The continued last-minute, and I mean last-minute, nature of it and the changing goalposts don't lend to the credibility of the budget process or to the credibility of this Oireachtas. That said, foundation stones have been laid to change the way we do budgets, and we must urgently build on them. The advent of the independent budget oversight, which will be in place for next year's budget preparations, has considerable potential in terms of Oireachtas oversight and scrutiny. I am a member of the Budget Oversight Committee, and whilst our discussions were more condensed this year owing to late establishment of committees, we did get a sense of the potential of the committee to scrutinise positions and proposals. And whilst committee members approached that process from very different political perspectives, the discussions were all entirely civil and informing. Arising from my experience of the first phase of the committee's work, I believe, if properly resourced, that committee has potential not just in a pre-budget phase, but especially in a post-budget phase, in terms of the responsibility of measuring progress along the themes that I have outlined today. Alaskan Corridor, it would have been politically easier to run to the hills and the beaches of the Mediterranean last March and last April. We haven't achieved everything we wish today. It is the start of a 3-year process. But our first and our major achievement is to secure the split that has ensured that Fine Gael has suddenly become converted to the values of fairness. Others will criticise. They will say they have done things differently. How's $1 billion extra in taxes, anyone? But everybody who criticises needs to outline a number of things. Where were they in March, in April and in May, when decisions had to be made about the stability and the political stability of this country? For every interest group they appeal to today, they should account as to their activities of that period and their work on achieving their programme in government. Fianna Fáil stood up to that challenge. We didn't run to the hills. We didn't seek the easy way out. And today, the fundamental shift that Minister Donoghue referred to at the beginning has occurred not just in economics, not just in politics, but in the fairness of budgets. That fundamental shift is our print on this budget.